Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me this morning. Earlier this week, I announced that the government would extend the public health emergency for 30 days, expiring on the 25th of October, 2022. An additional and final extension order for a further 37 days will take us to the 30th of November. The public health COVID-19 emergency orders, which provide the legal framework for our safety measures, has been in place since June 30th, 2020, following the state of emergency that was put in place on the 1st of April, 2020. They are made pursuant to Section 107A of the Public Health Act 1949 and declare that a public health emergency exists in Bermuda due to a communicable disease that threatens the island. The most recent extension of the public health emergency order approved by Parliament was in July, expiring on the 26th of September 2022. And subsequent to that, and with the approval of Cabinet, I exercised the powers available to me under the Act to make an order to declare a public health emergency for 30 days, expiring on the 25th of October. As I also announced earlier this week, the Ministry of Health will not seek an extension to the public health emergency beyond the end of November. The government has determined a roadmap out of the public health emergency in the coming weeks. This enables a continued assessment of the prevalence of infection and its impact on our health system as the different public health and safety measures are amended or ceased. This government intends to bring an end to the public health emergency in Bermuda, and tomorrow I will lay in the House the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Extension Number 1 Order 2022 to extend the current order for 37 days from the 25th of October, which will take us to the 30th of November 2022. The roadmap out of the public health emergency is as follows. As of the 3rd of October 2022, the mask mandate will be amended, so that it applies only to health service facilities, rest homes, and corrections facilities. For those using public transportation, taxis, minibuses, and limousines, as well as those working at or passing through the airport, mask wearing will be optional. As of the 25th of October 2020, the requirement for pre-arrival or pre-departure testing, arrival testing, and day 4 testing for travelers will end. This requirement, the requirement for unvaccinated visitors to provide proof of health insurance, which covers COVID medical expenses, will remain. As of the 30th of November 2022, all mask mandates and border controls related to COVID-19 will also end. I appreciate that there will be many questions regarding the future of the travel authorization, and it is important to recognize that health travel documents are not new to international travel. Certain countries have had entry requirements such as proof of yellow fever vaccination for a very long time now. The difference is that those types of entry requirements were limited to specific countries. However, the global pandemic caused the majority of countries around the world to implement and enforce COVID-19 travel documents entry requirements. In Bermuda, the travel authorization has served as an effective part of our COVID border controls and has provided key information to the Bermuda Tourism Authority as well as the Department of Immigration and HM Customs. The government will be having further discussions regarding Bermuda's travel entry requirements, taking into consideration what is appropriate and necessary in light of the ongoing pandemic, and we will announce these decisions before the 30th of November. Many people will be pleased that the regulations are being removed, but this does not mean that we can stop being responsible for our health and the health of others. The coronavirus continues to be a threat to our health and our well-being, though not as substantial as it was this time last year. And while the public health emergency may be ending in Bermuda, the global pandemic still continues. Although our numbers of positive coronavirus cases have declined significantly, we must not become complacent. We must be careful and be safe for ourselves as well as our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now take questions from the media. Let's start with the Royal Gazette.
Morning, Minister.
Good morning.
Gareth Finnegan from the Royal Gazette. I suppose the obvious question is, why continue until the end of November? Why can't we drop them now?
Thank you for that question. As you note that when we rolled out our various regulations and requirements to help to protect Bermuda in particular, as well as our hospital and our health system, and to minimize deaths and exposure, we all did it in a phased approach. And so likewise, we want to do a roadmap in a phased approach as it relates to taking steps to not to necessarily overwhelm our system, because we're seeing great results already, but we just want to do it in a roadmap and taking steps. So the first step, obviously, is, as we've indicated, at 25th of October, 25th of October, and the 30th of November. So the cabinet, in its deliberations, decided to take a cautious approach to rolling back our measures. There are very few public health measures in force, as we know, and we just wanted to do it in a phased approach, and that was the decision of cabinet.
But you've already done it in a phased approach because measures have gradually been reduced.
Correct.
But I mean, do you still think that Bermuda's in a public health emergency? Bermuda, is that the situation?
No, the
In
situation
which
is
case, why do we have public health orders?
we have,
Public safety?
we have public health safety orders, as I've indicated previously, to just better preserve and protect our health system as well as our population. We are doing it in a phased approach, just like when we rolled out the regulations initially, we did it in a phased approach, and the roadmap for ending the public health emergency for the for the 30th of November is also going to be taken in a step-by-step phased approach.
The rate of infection in Bermuda has been going down for months and months and months.
Absolutely.
Why couldn't you have started this phased approach earlier?
We've been watching, the epidemiology and surveillance unit has been monitoring our data, and has noticed, as you've indicated rightfully so, that we have seen a reduction in the amount of cases. We are fortunate enough to have quite a lot of persons, a lot of our population has been immunized. We have also been able to recently, as you would know, secure further boosters that will help to guard against the BA 4 and 5. And we've also been able to receive medical therapeutics to help in antivirals. So the government has decided that we will roll this back in a phased approach, and that's the decision that's been made since this announcement today.
Okay. Regarding the new travel authorization form, what's the purpose of it? Because initially, when it was first launched in June, July of 2020, it was to protect our borders.
Correct.
And that was when, you know, the pandemic was at its height, and okay, fine. It then became a case of, well, it's not so much to protect our borders, but we need the revenue. So what's it for now? Is it a revenue issue or a public health issue?
It's a combination of both, as I've always maintained that the travel authorization process was a border protection element. It allowed us to collect information on persons that were arriving to Bermuda. It also, the revenue that was generated from that assisted greatly with respect to our COVID responsiveness. It allowed for free testing, it allowed for border testing, and it allowed for all kinds of case management, tracking and tracing, which was necessary in our community in terms of trying to make sure that we minimized the adverse impact that we all saw on COVID.
But you're not doing any testing anymore, so you don't need the revenue for that cost, do you?
That's correct. However, as I've indicated, the cabinet has decided that we will remove all border controls. The border testing will end on the 25th, so we still will have border testing requirements up until the 25th of October, and then on the 30th of November is where all border controls, TA, et cetera, mask mandates, et cetera, will all be expired, so to speak, because there will no longer be a public health emergency.
So, just to clarify, you said that the TA will be dropped at the end of November?
All border controls, which,
Yeah.
as you appreciate, as you've just indicated, includes the travel authorization, will end at the 30th of November. The cabinet is meeting to discuss what next steps are, because as you can appreciate, countries around the world still have some type of entry requirement, whether it's the pink form that everybody's familiar with, or
Right.
other documentation. But those are discussions that cabinet is having to ascertain what information and what will be the entry requirements for coming into Bermuda, and that information will be made public as soon as those discussions and decisions have been made.
So it might be just a case of having to fill out a form rather than, you know, just like a customs form or whatever. You have a COVID form to fill out, and you won't have to, you know, pay your $40 and go online and...
Again, Rogue, Those are discussions that the Cabinet is having as we speak, and we will have those discussions and decisions will be made and announcements will be made forthwith accordingly.
Okay, Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. I would now take questions from the Bermuda Broadcasting Company.
Good morning, Minister. Gary Foster Skelton, Bermuda Broadcasting. I suppose I'm just piggybacking on Gareth's question there, because you said that the TA as we know it will end on November 30th, but you can't tell us at this time if the $40 fee will end or if there'll be some other kind of fee for tourists. Are you able to give us any indication of that?
At this point, as I've indicated previously, those are discussions that are ongoing within the Cabinet as to what will be the border entry mechanism and whether that border entry mechanism will require any type of fee associated with that. Those are all discussions, and when decisions have been made, you'll be the first to know.
Okay, you can understand the public's very interested in that in particular.
Absolutely.
It's been a controversial issue, but when there's other issues that we're watching overseas. The UK, in particular, we've over the last 7 days has seen a 12.7% rise in positives, despite a 13.2% drop in the number of tests, 16.9% rise in hospitalizations. What we often follow the UK after a number of weeks. What are the concerns right now, especially in the case that we are looking at dropping the testing at the borders? What are the concerns right now?
I think rather than addressing it in respect of concerns, I think it's important to recognize that Bermuda has done extremely well. And I have to again thank the members of the public for taking up their responsibility and being immunized. So we have very, very high immunization rates. We have been able to acquire, as I said, further boosters as well as antivirals. So the epidemiology and surveillance unit have been monitoring on a weekly basis. Every week we receive a report that indicates what are our indicators insofar as COVID. And we'll continue to watch that, but we're in a really, really good space. We anticipated to see rises over following the summer holiday because there was a lot of outdoor activity and festivals and carnivals and the like. And fortunately, Bermuda didn't. So we're really, really comfortable that we will be able to continue to ride this wave. Wave is not necessarily the good word, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
We continue to monitor it and we will keep our eyes on it. But the reality is there is other legislative provisions that exist. So if we need to, God forbid, enact certain precautionary measures because we're seeing our numbers rise, then we will do just that. But at this point, we are satisfied with the results of our immunization programs as well as our ability to get more boosters and antivirals. So we will continue to watch the space because, as I said previously in my statement, notwithstanding that Bermuda will no longer be in a public health emergency at the end of November, the world is still in the midst of a pandemic.
Now, you were talking about immunization, and with the stage we're at with the pandemic, there may be some resistance, especially if individuals who are generally healthy, not talking about seniors or those with compromised immune systems, but some of us may feel, oh, I've had my 2 shots, I've had my booster, do I have to have another one? What's the medical consensus right now for whether people should be getting their boosters if they're generally healthy? What's the thought?
You can appreciate I'm not a doctor. However, in having these discussions with the CMO, the consensus is that we recognize the benefit of immunization. And therefore, if boosters become available to help to boost your immune system to protect you against severe COVID and or hospitalization or death, then that is recommended. And therefore, we, again, have just recently acquired the one that will help us, the booster for BA4 and BA5. We're encouraging everyone over the age of 50 or persons that suffer an autoimmune challenge to speak to their doctor about getting the booster, but it is still recommended that the boosters that are becoming available, if you fit within that parameters that I've just spoken about, to go ahead and get a booster. But again, it's always been a matter of choice as it relates to the government's immunization program, and we just encourage persons to speak to their doctor so they can become well informed.
Okay. And there are, speaking again about immunisations, there are concerns in the UK about what they're calling a twindemic because of flu and COVID. What have there been discussions here in the winter time, flu and COVID?
And we share those concerns. However, we are still encouraging persons to adhere to what we've been speaking about insofar as we know that everybody will start going indoors when it gets a little bit cold, but we're just still encouraging persons to use their common sense and recognize that closed-in spaces and crowded places do have, unfortunately, a breeding ground to help with any type of influenza as well as COVID. So we're just, again, encouraging everyone to monitor their own health behaviors, monitor their locations, do what they can to help to minimize the risk of themselves contracting it and or spreading it. But we will continue to monitor that because we recognize that, influenza season is around the corner and people will start going indoors.
Okay. And my final question is more a reflective one. It feels very different, what a difference a year makes, in a sense, because on this date last year, the hospital was just coming over the peak of the Delta wave. There was a food container outside of the hospital to take the bodies of those who were dying, and we lost around 70 Bermudians in that time. It seems so long ago, but what would your reflections on that time now, a year later, as we are doing so well, as you say? What are your reflections now?
I have to start by saying, and I know I've said this before, but I have to continue to repeat this because the team at the Ministry of Health were so incredibly committed to assisting Bermuda get to where we are. And we wouldn't be in that position had it not been for that particular hardworking, dedicated team at the Ministry of Health. You're right. In a year, it on one hand, it seems like yesterday because it was a very, very sad occasion because we were announcing deaths regularly. And nobody would have anticipated that that the Delta would have caused us that much damage, but it did. However, subsequent to that, you would have seen that we would have had mass immunization as well as receiving, as I've said, more antivirals. So Bermuda is in a much better space. We're in a better place than we were 6 months ago. Again, I'm just grateful to the members of the community for taking advantage of the immunization program because that is what largely spared Bermuda from a worse fate that we saw last year with respect to Delta.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, members of the media, for coming out today. That concludes today's press conference.